Well, hi, welcome back, everyone. Um, I wanted to start opening up with something else. I don't remember what it was now, but oh well, whatever. Fuck it, right? Oh, I have to watch my language. I'm being very, very extra careful because I've had so many videos taken off of my channel. It's ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. I don't get it. It goes to show you they don't just conservatives get away like the right wing people. They get away with a lot more than I do as a leftist. I'm just saying, like, I don't think social media is targeting right wingers. I don't. It almost seems like they target leftists more because leftists tend to be anti-establishment, anti-corporatocracy, and people who like to make money don't really like the way people like me talk. But anyway, on this one, this is going to be a pain crisis one, doctor-patient forum kind of thing, chronic pain, opiate epidemic, and me being mad about the DEA and the CDC basically taking away pain meds from chronic pain patients. Why? Because I'm a chronic pain patient and this deeply affects me. Now, if you were to have talked to me many, many years ago before I was a chronic pain patient and you were to tell me that actually I remember seeing signs go up, I didn't really care. I just figured that this was a big push against people who were pretending to be chronic pain patients so that they could get opioids to bridge the gap between now and their next fix because they're going through withdrawals or whatever. And I was like, meh. But then when I became a chronic pain patient and needed pain management and realized nobody's getting pain meds, then, this turned into a state of activism because this is deeply damaging to a lot of people's lives. Very damaging, very damaging. We're talking about mass amounts of people being funneled into homelessness and dying without any kind of medical care out on the street. And this, basically, everyone who's addicted to opioids is being blamed on opioid medications, which is ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. If you are a chronic pain patient with intractable pain, the reality is that if you're going to be on pain medication for the rest of your life as it was originally treated, you had no reason really to go to the street because you could get a safe supply from your doctor, controlled and regulated, and you had legal permission. So why would you go to the street and break laws and put yourself in the position of being arrested and put in jail and doing a drug that isn't controlled and regulated in any way, shape, or form for public health and safety that could kill you instantly, especially with so much of it being contaminated by fentanyl? Why would you do that? That doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. The thing that really bothers me, and the reason why I definitely want to make these videos, is I think there's definitely a leftist argument to be had. And I think a lot of leftists have fallen for this crap because they think, well, we're sticking it to the man, screw pharmaceutical company, big pharma. And it's like, well, you're doing that, but it's coming at the cost of thousands of people's lives. The suicide rate of chronic pain patients, to my understanding, since the introduction of the CDC guidelines has risen by 700%. The other issue is that people have just died from things like tachycardia because they can't get their pain under control. I mean, you undergo open heart surgery and you wake up and all they give you is some Tylenol and a tramadol. Or somebody, I met somebody who was like this. They're a leftist like me, anarchist, libertarian, socialist. And, they were for this anti-opiate stuff until they went in and they got brain surgery. And they were sent home with literally only 3 pills. And they sent me a private message saying, hey, I just had a hole drilled in my head. Why are they only sending me home with 3 pills of 5 milligram oxys? And I was like, that's what they're doing with the opiate epidemic. They're banning pain meds even from people who rightfully need them. And see, most people just don't realize that that's what's happening. They think that, this is really controlling the opiate epidemic, this mass amount of people who have gravitated towards using illicit opiates. Personally, I think it's a societal existential crisis. You look at the 90s, I would say that was societal nihilism, and now we're in a societal existential crisis. And I think the reason why people all over, and they're not just using opiates, they're using all kinds of illicit drugs. In fact, there's a huge rise in the use of methamphetamines, illicit methamphetamines, that actually pales, like opiates pale in comparison to the rise of illicit methamphetamine use. Nobody wants to talk about that. generally overall, moreover, is that more and more people in society, I think, are using drugs, be that marijuana, alcohol, LSD, mushrooms, I mean, whatever. It's not just opioids, it's not just methamphetamine, it's a lot of stuff. And I think it's because people are miserable and they're not happy and they're using drugs to feel good because they don't feel good. Like I said, well, I'm going to discuss this. We live in a very aggressive, very hyper capitalist society, and our self worth is measured by our ability to work and make money. And the thing is we don't even get to follow dreams and aspirations, and we were pumped full of this fairy tale nonsense as kids, at least my generation, my age group was. We were told that you could be anything you want to be as long as you believed in yourself. And had we been older when they told us that, we would have told them they were foolish. Watching my language. So, I do think there is a leftist argument here that is being overlooked, and I think the left has been duped, and I don't think these people who are pushing this narrative are leftist. I don't think they're doing it to stick it to the corporate machine, because a lot of the things that they're advocating for, as opposed to opioids, are actually far more expensive, and in many instances have worse long-term effects, side effects, and worse withdrawals than the opioids you would be prescribed. They basically came in and they took out the safest and most effective opioids for treating pain, things like hydrocodone. Tramadol is very weak, but tramadol, hydrocodone, just codeine, morphine, oxycontins, and Percocets, which oxycontins only made up 4% of the overall opioid sales. Hydrocodones made up the largest amount. They are a really, really good medication to take to manage your pain because they only last for 4 hours. They've got acetaminophen plus a time-release formula, which makes them very, very hard to abuse. And they're also formulated, as admitted by Andrew Golodny in his own report with the CDC in 2015 that led to the 2016 guidelines. He admitted himself it's formulated to reduce constipation and formulated to be harder to abuse and be less addictive. In fact, a lot of these medications that they've banned, these opioid medications, have a withdrawal period in as little as 2 days and as the most as a week. And that's it. And every doctor that prescribes them is trained to taper people off so they don't even have to go through the withdrawals anyway. So we could do that. What we don't want to see is a society where the only opioids that are available are Suboxone, methadone, which honestly I don't personally care for. I don't think we should be using those for any reason. Other countries use medical grade heroin to taper people off of heroin, off of street heroin. And all you have to do is sort of establish what milligram dosage they're using sort of on a daily basis. It's going to fluctuate because it's street, it's not controlled or regulated for dose, so you get different doses. But all they have to do is basically establish a median dose and work from there and taper you down. And the reason why medical grade heroin works better than methadone or Suboxone is because Suboxone and methadone have a withdrawal period of 6 months, whereas heroin withdrawal period is only about a week. That's what makes it easier. And in the countries where they do that, they have a much higher success rate. Their crime levels go down because people don't feel the need to steal to support their habit. And STDs, STIs, whatever you want to call them, are going down in those areas of the countries that are doing that as well because there's less needle sharing. They can go to a clinic, a medical facility that's sanitary and clean. And also the places that are doing this, they have not seen a single person overdose and die. So that's something to be said for that, I think. But, those are socialist countries, and we can't do that here in the United States because, hyper-aggressive capitalism, whatever. Anyway. So what you have left in society is the worst opioids you could possibly get your hands on, which would be like Suboxone, methadone, and heroin, and now the heroin is contaminated with fentanyl. And fentanyl is pretty intense stuff. It's 6 months of withdrawal as well, and usually fentanyl is sort of reserved as one of those last resort kind of pain medications for like end-of-life cancer treatment and whatnot. It's not something you would give to a TOS patient like myself. A TOS patient like myself, I'd do good on hydrocodone. I'd be fine with that. Which is just codeine, by the way. It's just codeine. Pure codeine. Pure. It's not contaminated. It doesn't have 47... Because the opium poppy has like 47 different alkaloids in it, and you don't want to be consuming all 47 of those. So when you take the medications, you're getting like a pure form of codeine or morphine, which makes it a lot safer and less addictive. But, we tend to ignore stuff like that. Or the fact that opioids are extravagant. I mean, just exceedingly less expensive than all these other things. Now, I'm going to sort of just kind of get right into the video that is going, like there's a video I'm going to show a screenshot. That's not the screenshot that I wanted. Where is it? Pray tell. I have to look for it. Excuse me. How unprofessional. Maybe I'll try to, cut this part out. I have the video, but no, we can't. I do kind of have a screen. I can't play the video because I learned this video, which it's really weird that this is the case with this video, because it is with the Mayo Clinic. It is like medical type stuff, and typically not something that you make private. So I'm just going to take you directly to my Twitter account with lovely Miss Carrie, and so here's part of it where, you know, we have the Mayo Clinic airing Jane Ballantyne, and Jane Ballantyne, she is what this video is really about. I think she's a disingenuous Nazi pig. And Mark Sullivan, again, another person I don't really care for, who are advocating for long-term pain patients to be excluded from the, and I'm not sure what that is, right to pain relief. This is eugenics at play in 2023 USA, questioning the right to pain relief. And then there's the video. And then, you know, of course, I have this, and I cannot play it because I noticed at the end it said this is copyrighted. I'm like, oh, really? That's cute. You're going to have something from the Mayo Clinic, something that deals with the CDC, the Mayo Clinic, the DEA. This is all, I see, disingenuous Nazi pig. And it's copyrighted. You know, that's messed up. That's messed up. I think that was the control prompt for that. Nope. So I can't play that video. I'm not going to risk it, but I will give you a rundown of what is essentially in it. Because I typed it out. So I will leave the link to it so you can go and watch it after you're done with this video if you really care to see what's in it. It's only about 9 minutes long. I recommend that you do watch it so you can see what the experts that are influencing policy are actually saying, because sometimes what they say is really insane, and it's really quite amazing to me that these people are being considered experts and that they're being able to influence policy, because being someone who isn't an expert in like medical science, listening to these people, I know what they're doing is not science. You know, what they're doing, a lot of it is that they're starting with a conclusion and then building their premise to fit the conclusion that they already have a preconceived notion of, you know, that this is bias, this is confirmation bias. Or another thing that I have often seen is correlation instead of causation, which that's like remedial science. That's like science 101. And that's not something we should be doing when it comes to medical science. So in the video, Jane says the introduction to treating chronic pain came from palliative care and extended into treating chronic pain with opioids. The fact of the matter is, opioids are the longest. This is me interjecting, by the way. The fact of the matter is, opioids are the longest prescribed pain medication treatment on earth. Jane also goes into blaming pain medications for the opiate epidemic in its entirety, which does not explain why so many people have turned to illicit opioids who have never been on opioid therapy for pain, which is true. A lot of people who are using illicit opiates had never even been exposed to an opioid pain medication because of pain. They may have been exposed to the medication for illicit recreational purposes, but not because of pain. And if we want to open up the conversation, should acute pain be treated with opioids, considering that it's acute, they're not as much at risk of damaging their stomach, their liver, their kidneys from NSAIDs and acetaminophen, and that they'll essentially heal and not be in pain anymore. Maybe they shouldn't be on opioids because they're being exposed to it, and maybe that could usher them in to using illicit. I don't know. That's a conversation that we could open up and have if people weren't being so dogmatic. She says the that lifelong treatment of opioids is much different than short-term treatment with opioids, referring to end-of-life care specifically as short-term. Mark does bring up at some point that pain treatment is complex, and we really do not know what is overprescribing and underprescribing. Mark also brings up the idea of a remedy, which to my understanding implies there is a cure, which would negate the definition of chronic pain. Chronic pain means being curable. You can't get rid of it. It doesn't go away. He says the remedy is using the 0 to 10 pain scale. Very strange to call that a remedy. I am not sure how this scale quantifies as a remedy. It is a way of trying to measure pain. Mark talks about pain patients wanting to reduce their pain intensity, which seems to be a reasonable request to improve functionality. One thing I would like to bring up that they do not discuss is how the nature of chronic pain conditions has changed over the years. We do not live in small villages and simple lives anymore. We live in a massive infrastructure, which changes the dynamic of how the body can be permanently injured. It changes a lot of dynamics, really. There's also many things that used to turn into chronic pain conditions that we now have cures for and are no longer considered chronic pain conditions. In the past, some of these chronic pain conditions would have resulted in death due to the nature of the condition and lack of medical knowledge and understanding, which has also changed. A big change that has caused a spike in chronic pain is the Industrial Revolution, as workers have become more exposed to manual repetitive labor. Medical scholars at that time took note of a growing rise in chronic pain conditions, many that still exist today, and even some new ones as we move our bodies repetitively in ways that are not conducive to our physical health. Some new one, or there's also the exposure to chemicals and other types of working conditions that were not there prior to the Industrial Revolution. And this is something they do not take into account as to why possibly there are more opioids prescribed today than before. This is also very doubtful, as opiates were the main choice of use for chronic pain and pain in general. Benjamin Franklin even used laudanum to ease his pain from gout and kidney stones. Cough syrup with codeine in it was available over the counter up even into the 1980s. I have no idea why they think using opioids for pain is a new phenomena when it has been practiced literally for millennia and not even made illegal until the 1920s. In fact, the whole reason why the U.S. has the Controlled Substances Act is because they realized these drugs they were making illegal had medicinal value to them and just didn't want people consuming them recreationally. If these anti-opiate people get their way, they will essentially render the Controlled Substances Act useless. Mark does admit nothing reduces pain intensity in the short term like opioids. Exactly, Mark. Somehow he jumps from saying that we simplify pain and that causes the opiate epidemic, which really doesn't make sense and is a leap of logic with no rhyme or reason. Jane admits chronic pain is incredibly complicated and it can be, can be depending on the condition. Maybe things like CRPS is something to call complicated because the mechanism and function of CRPS is not fully understood, which stands for complex regional pain syndrome for those of you who don't know. It's a very rare condition like my condition, NTOS, and is up there in pain levels like NTOS is as well. NTOS is so rare and complicated, I've been told by all of my local doctors that they won't touch it because it's rare and complicated. When a part of the body is permanently broken and causes nerve impingement, however, it is pretty self-explanatory that even I can understand it. Jane says there's been a lot of debate whether it is a disease or symptom, and again, it would seem the answer is obvious, that it really can be both. Even if pain is a symptom of an underlying condition, that does not invalidate it. Jane admits that chronic pain is all the above. Jane admits that different chronic pain conditions render different outcomes, in that not everything that causes chronic pain can be treated or cured at the underlying source. that there are chronic pain conditions that doctors cannot make better. We are short on treatment for and thus have no cure. So the only thing left to do is to treat the symptom, which in the case of any chronic pain condition is pain. By her logic, there are many chronic pain patients out there that should be receiving opioid medication by her own admission. This makes her incredibly disingenuous, in my opinion, as she helped ban access to opioid pain medication for millions of chronic pain sufferers. According to her, I should be prescribed pain meds, and not only is that not happening, I am entirely medically abandoned at this point, as I cannot even get a checkup. Thanks for that, Jane. Jane admits that many patients will do anything they can to take pain away. Okay, so why did we take opioids away from chronic pain patients, where they have gone to the streets looking for pain relief? Many of these people have resorted to the unregulated and uncontrolled real ANCAP model of street drugs that are dangerous, deadly, and held to no standard for public health and safety. After pain meds were banned, the illicit use of opiates went up through the roof. For now, we must say this is a correlation, but I am skeptical of this. I think people are desperate for pain control. Jane says that pain patients do not have a right to pain relief, which is what our friend Carrie was saying in that tweet. This is exactly what she was talking about, that Jane was saying nobody should have access to pain relief. You don't deserve it. You don't need to. You just don't. Just be in pain. We don't care how debilitating it is. We don't care how excruciating it is. We don't care how much you're suffering. You are not entitled to pain relief. She talks about how chronic pain patients should engage in self-care, but does not specify what this is or why that would even work or be helpful. Jane says there's a lot of things people can do to improve pain without medical intervention, but does not say what those things are. Jane does mention she thinks pain control can come without the use of pills, injections, or operations, which, if followed to its natural conclusion, is patient abandonment. Mark says we are prescribing more opioids than any other developed nation, but does not take into account, and this is important, pay attention to me, this is me interjecting and I have a point. He does not take into account or mention, and none of them do, population density, which would be statistical bias, nor the fact that we are a hyper-capitalist society with extremely weak, if not non-existent, social safety nets that every other developed nation has, and might play a key role as to why that is. Mark oddly brings up, in more words, the idea that all treatment options come with risks and benefits. He says this in a lot of words. It's ridiculous. And really, this is exactly what he's talking about, is the risks and benefits behind any treatment. And any treatment does. Any treatment is going to have risks and benefits. So I don't know why he chose to use such a lengthy, wordy, but yeah. Which is already, which is already well known. And addiction is a risk for most of what is on the table for pain treatment, and that includes mood disorders too. Like, pretty much any medication for the treatment of pain or any medication for the treatment of a mood disorder is going to come with the risk of chemical dependency. Whether it's habit forming or not, and what you consider addiction is complicated, because you have chemical dependency and then you have the obsessive compulsive behavior to want to take a substance repeatedly, which is, I believe, that's another form. Then you also have habit forming. It feels good. You want to do it again. So I'm specifically talking about chemical dependency. Some of them would also have like the habit forming effect. Like some people find gabapentin to be a pleasurable sensation. I don't. I find gabapentin to be horrible. It causes me to go into a state of mania and psychosis, which is why I don't take it for pain. Makes me a threat to myself and others. So no, I can't take that. The rest is just Mark advertising his report with the Mayo Clinic and Jane Ballantyne's book. All right. Yay. So another thing that I want to show that I find to be incredible. Wow, this is incredible. I wasn't recording the video the whole time. So a lot of this video is going to be it's gonna be just audio. Oops. Sorry about that, guys. Sorry. That's my fuck up. I'm supposed to watch my language. Ugh. Anyway. Crap. I'll should still have the screenshot and all that good stuff anyway. So moving on though to the next video. or this, it's actually a clip that I made. So you can, and I think it's really I think it's really important that you listen to how these people talk. Seriously, listen to how these people talk. Did I get this right? Nope. Okay.
And the way clusters of doctors approach pain medication. Can you just talk us through how you see it?
So,
listen to this guy.
An ontological question, which is what is chronic pain? And the new NICE guidance refers to primary chronic pain and secondary chronic pain. Now, I'd never heard of this distinction before the guidance came out. And I've never...
Jane Ballantyne is in this one too, and I will leave the link to this one in the description as well.
...come across anybody with primary chronic pain.
He's never come across anyone with primary chronic pain. Listen to where he goes with this. This is absolutely incredible to me.
Always secondary to something, like whether that something is, for example, a neuropathy, sort of a disease like that. But what we're usually talking about is pain that is secondary to somebody who's had a traumatic developmental history. In other words, adverse childhood events, chronic stress or toxic stress, intimate partner violence, for example, domestic violence. And my experiences of working in one place for nearly 20 years and sticking with the same patients for that entire time. So you don't necessarily see the big picture if you don't stick around long enough. So primary care this way can be described as ultra brief.
Did you not catch that? So everyone who is a chronic pain patient ate a Subway sandwich before they became a chronic pain patient. Therefore, Subway sandwiches create chronic pain. You know, this is correlation, not causation. And the idea that there is a doctor out there that functions like this, which is just anti-science, like this is just not how you do science at all, like realizing that there's a difference between correlation and causality is like rudimentary science. It's science 101, it's remedial science, it's like the very first thing you learn. That just because we see a pattern doesn't mean that the pattern is related to a specific outcome.
Interactions, ultra long relationships.
Right.
And also you're an expert in the neighborhood and the families and the relationships, and you know the parents and the grandparents, and you know what happened before, and you know where people have been, where they've come from. And I'm yet to meet somebody with chronic pain, the kind of people we're talking about here, for whom the problem with chronic pain is not a symptom of complex trauma. Like 100% of everybody I've seen. Now, how you define that trauma, whether it was child abuse, whether it was domestic violence, whether it...
So anyone who's been through trauma is going to, like all the chronic pain patients he's ever met have been through trauma, so he thinks that trauma is what causes chronic pain instead of a physical issue. This is whack to me. I mean, just bizarre. I'm trying to watch my language. This is so far out there in the ether. I have nothing nice to say about this. I honestly think this guy's license should be revoked. This is ridiculous. What about all the people out there who have experienced trauma that aren't chronic pain patients? Can we explain that? Because I really don't think trauma is what causes chronic pain. I mean, somebody could be exposed to trauma that causes chronic pain, like being hit by a car. That's a traumatic event. But the thing that causes the chronic pain is not the traumatic event itself. or the PTSD that you get from about cars afterwards. It's the fact that the car physically hit your body and broke a bunch of stuff. That's what causes the pain. I would think that would just be just obvious, like painstakingly obvious. Like, you don't even need to be a doctor.
It was stories of immigration, whether it's to do with racism, whether it was chronic bullying, whether it was the loss of a significant family member or carer.
So racism. So this is why if you are LGBTQ, AI plus, a person of color, or a woman, you are less likely to get opioids is based on this specific idea that they think that people of these categories have all been exposed to some kind of trauma, like racism, homophobia. Oh, LGBTQIA plus people are just inherently mentally ill, so you automatically have a substance use disorder. Oh, you're a woman and you've experienced sexual trauma, therefore you're automatically going to have substance use disorder. Oh, you're a person of color, you've experienced bullying and racism and systemic racism and oppression, therefore you automatically have a substance use disorder. This is very insulting. This is I don't know how people don't see the right-wing undertones in that. I don't get it. You know, like, the only people I've ever heard say that being homosexual is a mental illness are far-right people, religious nuts, sort of fascist-y type people. And people on the left are eating this garbage up and thinking that, like, you think that this is legit? Like, seriously? This is pseudoscience. This is pseudo-intellectualism at its finest. This is propaganda. I titled this video, The Doctor Who Confuses PTSD with Chronic Pain.
Whatever. The trauma is, the pain is the trauma. It's not the event or the events when you were growing up. And then the question is, so if the question, what is chronic pain? It's a symptom of toxic stress and trauma, almost always.
Really,
the question
sorry,
is,
Dr. Johnson, forgive me. Yeah, this is, as I said, so I feel like I was really naively. It's not a hangover of a medical treatment or an accident or an illness that has been misdiagnosed and not resolved. When you say always,
20 years of sticking with the same patients, I can't think of any examples where somebody's come back and said, you know what you've been talking about.
Look how defensive he became. And see, that's what I run into. I ask these people simple questions and they go, block. We're not going to do that. As just, if you went in and saw this guy and you told it, like, if you were a person of color, a woman, or especially a woman that's been assaulted at some point in their life, like, can you imagine being LGBTQ and going and seeing this guy going like, oh my God, I'm a chronic pain patient, help me, help me, help me. Oh, well, you know, your chronic pain is probably from homophobia that you've spent in your life, or the fact that you are LGBTQ because it's a mental illness and therefore, you know, you experience more pain as being, you know, an LGBTQ person, and it's all in your head. It's just a mental illness. That's extremely homophobic, okay? Like, I don't know why the left is supporting this crap. I mean, this is crap. You need to stop supporting it. It's crap.
Chronic pain and trauma, 20 years, I finally discovered that actually it's some other illness and here's the pill that's going to fix it. Right. That might happen. I'm open-minded as to that, but it hasn't happened yet. And then the question is, what do the drugs do? And how do the drugs manage the effects of trauma? So trauma has, there's a picture on my wall behind me, here you can see the hand, which is my approach. The trauma causes toxic stress.
I don't know what the hand thing is about. He points at that. You can see the hand. What does that have to do with anything?
Imagine you're a kid. Your fight, flight, freeze, flee, friend response. That's the stress response kicks in. You're terrified because of what's happening at home. You can't run away. You can't fight it off. You're too small. You're stuck. You can't tell anyone about it. So you hold all that inside. Mm-hmm. What does it feel like? I mean, just sitting here, what does that feel like? You feel sick. You feel nervous. You feel tense. You feel stressed. You feel exhausted. It feels painful. So the point is, it's not a psychological or an emotional problem. It's a physiological problem. This is why Bessel van der Kolk calls his book "The Body Keeps the Score." You internalize this in your biology, in your nervous system, your physiology, your autoimmune system, your gas.
Does he have any evidence that your central nervous system internalizes psychological trauma and interprets that into physical pain? I mean, like, I've had psychological trauma, and I would say that there's a glaring difference between psychological pain and physical pain. Big difference. I've had panic and anxiety attacks and they're uncomfortable, but I wouldn't call them painful. They're not physically painful. They're scary, but they're not physically painful. What's going on with the nerve compression in my brachial plexus and my thoracic triangle, that's painful. That's painful.
Intestinal system. That's why most people with chronic pain also have problems with chronic constipation, irritable bowel syndrome, weak bladders.
I don't have these problems. I don't know what he's talking about.
Numb feet. This idea that you're cut off from the waist down because you can't bear to connect with what's happened there. So chronic pain.
This is such mumbo jumbo. Like he made this crap up. I'm telling you, he made this crap up. It's not based off of any study or anything. You couldn't prove this with a study.
It never occurs on its own. Like I have a register of all our patients with chronic pain. None of them have only got chronic pain, or maybe one or two have, but they're quite young and yet to develop some of the other problems. So you never treat it in isolation. So it's always an aspect of trauma. It's always it's a physiological response that goes with other issues of physiology and biology and neurology and so on, all these other ologies which are affected. And you might call that hyperarousal or hypervigilance. And then the drugs, they're all CNS depressants, opiates, gabapentin. All they're doing is casting a blanket over your entire nervous system to make the symptoms tolerable. And then there's patterns of addictive behavior.
Yeah, that's the point.
Which is compulsive seeking of stuff that gives short-term pleasure or relief that's almost impossible to give up despite the long-term harms. So for some people, it's OxyContin. For other people, it's shopping or sex or gambling or being on the internet or...
Yes, lots of people go gambling to treat their pain. What are you talking about?
Cutting or OCD. They're all manifestations of addictive behavior.
God.
That's hyper-aroused, hypervigilant, and traumatized.
So John, and the way clusters of doctors approach.
Shit. So yeah, this is why I think it's incredibly important for those of you out there to actually look at this stuff and listen to what they're saying. Like you just heard this dude. Is that rational? Like, these are the people that are coming up with the opiate epidemic stuff and making policy, working with the CDC, working with the DEA, putting doctors in prison for like 120 years as being drug peddlers because they run a clinic that treats opiate use disorder, other substance use disorders, as well as chronic pain patients, and their opiate prescribing score is through the roof because there's no other doctor in a rural area. This has happened. And as a result, because they pull that doctor out of that area, the patients they were seeing, whether they were getting opioids or not, they have nowhere else to go. These elderly people with a lot of health conditions, they end up dying needlessly. They didn't have to die. They could have lived many, many more years. You know, like you can't be thankful for something like that. That's not humanitarian. That's anti-humanitarian. And the thing is that it's like, I mean, these rich people who are chronic pain patients, they're still getting opioids. It's the working class, the proletariat, the poor that aren't getting it. Isn't that fun? All right, so then I had another video. It was a TikTok video. It's a guy talking about how terrible gabapentin is. I'm not going to play that. I've talked about how terrible gabapentin is many times over. Gabapentin is a horrible drug, but I will leave the link in the description. You can go and watch it for yourself. I am a big advocate of learning things for yourself. A big advocate of that. So, yeah, it's nothing new to me what that guy says about gabapentin. So this is what I'm gonna my follow up with all of this. The anti-opiate people are nothing more than bourgeoisie paper pushers. People like Jane Ballantyne, the people we saw in the video, they're paper pushers that see the proletariat, manual laborers, and the working class as a lesser pedigree. They act like everyone should be doctors and lawyers just like them because that is how society works, right? The working class gives their blood, sweat, and tears to make society go, and when you become broken, they throw you onto the streets to grow sick and die with no dignity. The reality is we live in a hyper-capitalist society and are only... I'd also like to add that there is a phenomenon going on right now where long-term care facilities are having a real problem with this anti-opiate propaganda, and that family members are going in and yelling at the staff nurses because they administered an opioid medication to their family member, their loved one, that's in a long-term care facility. They're getting mad that they're being given opioids and they're on their deathbed. Like, this is becoming a growing problem for those who work at long-term care facility and hospice. Perceived value is based on our ability to work and make money. Very anti-humanitarian. Have any of them considered this factor as to why here in the U.S. our opioid prescribing is so high that, one, it may have to do with population density, but also the fact we do live in such an aggressive capitalistic society. We do not have the social safety nets here in the U.S. that many other countries do, and this could play a big part in why we have so many prescribed opioid medications for pain. We have to survive. We got to survive. We got to make money to survive. And the government here in the United States, it's not like, oh, you become disabled and you apply for disability and then you have it. It's not like in Canada. In Canada, a doctor says, well, you're disabled. Boom, you have disability. That's not how it works here. Doctors don't even make the decision of whether or not you're disabled here in the United States. It's almost cussed again. It's lawyers and judges, people with law degrees, not medical degrees, non-medical people making medical decisions. Ugh. I keep asking what the solution is, and that gets me blocked by these quote-unquote experts. The question is simple. Okay, fine. We take away all the opiate medications for chronic pain patients. What's the solution, though? What are we going to do with all of these disabled chronic pain patients? I think this is a fair and honest and good faith question that is deserving of an answer. Honestly, it makes the so-called experts look weak when they cannot answer a simple question as benign as, what's the plan? The reality is we do not live in a country that is willing to give HUD housing, food stamps, disability, early retirement based on disability, Medicaid, and now growing trend of medical care companies no longer taking private payers. This is becoming an issue. If the expectation is to get all these people on disability, the GOP, the Republican Party, will never allow that. Honestly, the only way to stop the mass influx of chronic pain patients would be to outlaw manual physical labor or repetitive motion labor. Again, not only will the GOP, the Republican Party, not allow this, I don't think the Democrats will even allow for this either. Along with that, no one should be made to work more than 30 hours a week. And again, the GOP will not allow for that, and it would be a hard sell to the neoliberal Democrats. Even if we were to pull such a stunt off, then there are still conditions like fibromyalgia and CRPS that exist, complex regional pain syndrome. These are not caused by repetitive motion, yet they are still chronic pain conditions. There is not a question that pain is a symptom. And when we cannot cure or treat the underlying cause of a symptom, we treat the symptom. This is the majority of medications that exist. They are not cures. The majority of the medications only treat symptoms and not the cause. Very few medications actually treat or cure the underlying conditions. Let's look at the table when it comes to managing chronic pain. There's gabapentinoids, steroids, psychiatric medications, NSAIDs, Tylenol, which is acetaminophen, nerve blocks, trigger point injections, spinal stimulators, and epidurals. First off, many of these have side effects, long-term effects, and withdrawal symptoms said to be worse than opioids. Another thing is that the FDA has not only not really approved, they haven't approved epidurals or spinal stimulators because messing with the spine can paralyze you and is seen as an unnecessary risk. And it really doesn't provide you with a whole lot of pain relief. And it's very, very, very expensive. Some of the models of spinal stimulators require you to get a surgery every 5 years to replace the battery. There have even been cases of battery acid leaking into your blood and causing battery acid burns all over the patient's body. And there's also the simple question of, putting electrodes in the spine and shocking the central nervous system. What's the rationale behind that? That's a very strange idea. Like, let's electrocute the spine and see what that does. Weird. Aside from that, we have other things that I personally see as nothing more than a placebo. If you want to do these things, that's up to you. I'm a big advocate of personal choice. What works for you, if it works for you, do it. That's fine. But don't take what works for me away, which has been done. Such as chiropractics, mindfulness, which mindfulness is just a fancy way of saying meditation, and acupuncture, which if you look up dry needling on Google Scholar, and I was shocked to find this actually, Dr. Michael Chapman told me about this, and I was shocked to find this, you will find there's really no difference between dry needling and acupuncture. There are no studies that really show the effectiveness of dry needling at all. The thing is, all these pain management options I've discussed are exceedingly expensive and don't really work for what they are worth. If you think about it for only 2 seconds, this really makes tons of sense. The pharmaceutical companies have enough money, power, and lobbying power. They could have stopped this if they really wanted to. The reason I personally think they didn't stop it is because it is more profitable for them to have not stopped it. You do the math here, okay? I'm going to tell you some figures. You do the math in your head. You tell me what is more profitable. A $20 bottle of opioids that are a 30-day supply with only 2 days to 1 week of withdrawals that are less intense than their illegal counterparts and can be tapered off slowly as every doctor is trained to do this. Then you have a bottle that costs $1,111 for a 30-day supply, where you may never be able to stop taking it because you could have a grand mal seizure and die. You could pay $2,000 or more, sometimes it's more, a lot of the times it's more, for a nerve block or trigger point injection that only gives you 4 hours of pain relief. Tons of possible damage to the body, too. there's no reason to go through all of it as, like, all the things that I mentioned, as it all is pretty much the same conclusion. You tell me what is the more profitable option. You tell me how they are going to sell dangerous procedures that have low rates of effectiveness and overly priced when opioids are still on the table and have been used literally for a millennia to treat pain and can cost as little as $20 without insurance. From a purely profit perspective, it makes more sense to have people on the more costly and more fixed directives than an opioid that a person can easily be tapered off of with no withdrawals at all if desired. You tell me. What's more profitable there? You tell me who has more power, the chemical pharmaceutical companies or the tech pharmaceutical companies, which actually there was a conflict of interest with the CDC panel, as several of the people who sat on the CDC panel who created the CDC opioid prescribing guidelines from 2016 were being paid by pharmaceutical tech companies, like for spinal stimulators. And just to let you know, with homeless, a lot of cities, what they do with homeless people they can't identify, they just mass cremate them. There's no dignity, none. And honestly, you know, even if we had better social safety nets in this country like every other developed nation has, I'd still say that, you know, a person wanting the dignity to have the functionality, to retain as much functionality and independency as possible is still a completely valid reason to want to be able to take pain meds. Maybe you don't need to take them as often if you can stay at home and collect some kind of disability. And that in and of itself would prevent chemical dependency. I still think it's valid, though, to want to use it to retain as much independency and dignity as possible. But just throwing people out in the street saying, oh, you can't work anymore, you're useless, go to the street, no health care, you're sick and dying, now you're dead, we're not even going to identify you, throw you in a pile of bodies in an incinerator and burn them. I find this deeply unhumanitarian. I find this extremely messed up. And all the things that they offer for pain management now are so expensive, you really can't afford them unless you are exceedingly wealthy. So this really has a huge effect on the proletariat, the working class of the poor. Not so much the upper class. They have to jump through some hoops now to get their opioids, but they still get them. And meanwhile, people are losing their jobs because, you know, they're becoming chronic pain patients and they're permanently partially disabled from it. And then, like I said, good luck with getting disability, Medicaid, HUD housing, renters' rights, all that good stuff. So, do you really think it's a leftist position to be against opioids? You know, the left has been a big crusader against the war on drugs for a long time, and really, honestly, I see this as nothing more than an extenuation of the war on drugs. I talked to a doctor. It's the DEA that's popping into his office all the time and looking at files. It's not the CDC. It's the DEA. And the DEA is working hand in hand with the CDC, and the DEA pushed the CDC to create the guidelines. I'm not entirely convinced either that opioid medications are even responsible for the opiate epidemic. I really do think it's a societal existential crisis because the wealth disparity in this country has become so immense. I mean, you have people like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk sitting on a hoard of resources that is far more than they could ever do anything with in their lifetime or even their great grandkids' lifetimes. And this idea of trickle-down economics, they're a clear example that doesn't work. You know, their employees are making subpar wages. So I don't know why people think that's a thing that works. We could continue doing the deregulation practice, but it seems like the more we deregulate companies, the more and more power we throw to them, and they substantiate more power as an oligarch over our government, as opposed to power to the people. Undermining democracy. The democratic process. Just fantastic. And a lot of what is going on here deeply resembles what fascists did in Nazi-occupied Germany called Acton T4, which I brought up before. So, I don't think supporting this is a leftist position. I just don't. I really don't. I think it's a position that an authoritarian, hierarchical person would support. You know, these, especially like moral busybodies that are like, oh my God, you're putting a substance in your body that I don't like. And it's like, you know what, don't tell me what to do. I'm aware of the risks. Being shackled to a medication is not fun, but you know what's worse? Taking literally all day, like from 6 in the morning to 9 o'clock at night to make a cup of coffee, brush your teeth, and take a shower. That's my life now. That's why these videos are rare now. I don't make as many videos as I used to because of this condition. I can only do things for about 20 to 15 minutes at a time before I have to sit down, unless I have some way of managing my pain, which I'm going to keep that a secret. But I am unapologetically doing something, and I don't care what people think. I don't give a shit anymore. I don't care. You can hate it if you want. I don't care. You know, anybody that calls themselves an anarchist, a libertarian socialist, and therefore this anti-opioid medication, opiate epidemic thing, you're not a libertarian socialist. You're not an anarchist. You're fake. You're a poser. That's what I have to say. You know, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, baby, all the way. Break laws. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comment section below. Sorry about the lack of video in the first part. And with that, I'm out.